Good morning, everybody. I would like to call this session of the Division to order. Notice that we are treating one territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our treating order comes from Shoalhaven 40 First Nation and Treaty 3 territory. With me today is Ron Merritt and Cynthia Stevens. My name is Harvey Diamond. The City Assessment Department is represented by Merrick Froelich, and our administrative secretary is Jaswinder Kumar. We'll be hearing application revision of the assessment rules in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will discussion to those matters. The statements are made at this hearing are sworn testimony. Anyone speaking to a matter must first be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties not considered as evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes decisions based on the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that we mail to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Assessment, the Manitoba Municipal Board, that pertains to assess value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench that pertains to an application for exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, permission to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessment assessment followed by questions, and the applicant may have, and then the applicant assessment followed by the questions. Each side will be provided with an opportunity to do so. Once all the evidence upon an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The question will be for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make decisions. You will receive the board's decision by written mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will form part of a public record. I think we'll be hearing items 7 and 8 on our docket today. And Mr. Kumar, you can swear in the parties at this time.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just before we begin, if I may, there's one individual I don't think is on yet, and I don't know if he's having difficulty connecting. It's Robert Bailey, and he had submitted the evaluation report. So I don't see him on as of yet. I was speaking to him this morning, so I'm not sure if he's having any technical difficulties joining.
Mr. Mercury, are you able to start without him, or do you have a? Do you want to present when all testimonies taken?
I'm sorry?
Are you asking us to adjourn for a minute until?
Yes, if we could, it's essential that he's part of this process. So I can try calling him to see if there's an issue with his connection, but I was speaking with him literally 45 minutes ago. So.
Okay, well, we'll stand by for a few minutes and you try to contact him.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, should we go on a break?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, so the first matter we'll hear on the agenda today is Leslie Boulevard, and we'll swear in the parties and then proceed.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Merrick Froelich.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Mr. Mercury, please state your full name.
James Mercury.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Bailey, do you please state your full name?
Robert Harold Bailey.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Froelich, you can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. File number is 22-378. Roll number is 0603005500. Address is 870 Lagimodia Boulevard. Owner is Maple Leaf Consumer Foods Incorporated. And the 2023 assessed value is $28,488,000. Property is industrial light manufacturing. There are 6 different buildings here. The effective years for these buildings are between 1964 and 2021, with an effective year built of 1989. The wall heights range from 8 to 36 feet. And we have a land area of 1,515,564. And a leasable area of 445,855. We're asking for the assessment to be confirmed for 2023. And just to give the panel members some background information, Mr. Mercury and Robert and I know each other really well. We had this appeal for supplemental appeal in 2021 and for 2022. And as it states right now, the 2022 valuation will be at the municipal board based on the decision that had taken place last springtime. I will move forward now with my presentation. Property owner has been compliant with regards to filling out income and expense mailer information. And I got a series of pictures. Some of them were from the website. Some of them were provided from previous appeals. And this is what we have here. So for those who don't know, Maple Leaf Plant is located in the northeastern section of the city of Winnipeg, or the eastern section for sure, on the corner of La Jimodier and Marion. There's some pictures on page 2 and page 3, just giving you a background of some of the external shots. And on page 4, what we're looking at here is this is a 2016 picture where the building had taken place, where it's essentially a U-shaped building, and what they've done is they filled up the U. So I want to show this with regards to the expansion that had taken place, which is over 70,000 square feet. So you can see the open space there where they had trucks previously located on the western portion of the building with the lighter roof lines. 2018 shows another picture of top of 2018 shows another picture of the building before construction, and the bottom of page 5 shows the new construction that had taken place. On page 6, there are interior pictures from 2014, and just for the record, for storage capacity, there's at least 50,000 square feet of that was built in 1994 at 36 feet. So it's showing some of the racking manufacturing. And just for the record, because of COVID, I have not been able to inspect this property recently, but I do have a history with this building for the panel members. I actually worked on the kill floor in 1987 for a summer. So I am familiar with the older structure of this building. Page 7 shows some pictures that we have on file here. And the same thing at page 8. So to show all the values of the permits that have taken place recently, I provided a quick summary of all the permit work that has taken place. So here's a series of permits that have been taken out since 2019 up until 2020. And the total value of these permits is $21,576,000. On the bottom of page 9 shows an overview of some of the construction additions that have taken place of the $2 million on the bottom of page 9. On the top of page 10 for $18 million, and then on the bottom of page 10 for more part for the permanent foundation, all showing the permit values that have taken place that have been completed. In page 11, because there's a press release with regards to the building expansion that have taken place, because everyone loves bacon. Maple Leaf is opening up a center of excellence, a $182 million bacon center. And here's an overview of some of the building expansion that have taken place. Our vision is to become the most sustainable protein company on earth, as applies to our very best convenience food, which includes a delicious pre-cooked bacon. They're talking about construction costs about taking place of the bacon center of excellence. And then once the building's at full capacity, it expects to bring another additional 350 jobs to the plant, bringing total employees to 1,900. There's another press release from Global News. And then on the bottom, it talks about the government's incentive program with regards to funding this expansion. So the Manitoba government sent out a press release saying that the province invested $1.9 million in the industry expansion to support approximately 350 positions that are taking place at Maple Leaf Foods. On the top of page 13, talks about the Maple Leaf press release with regards to them increasing the 3-book bacon center with regards to the expansion that had taken place. They had said this expansion here was for $182 million to Winnipeg. I'm talking about how this is going to be fully in line in 2021. As of right now, I'm not too sure if they are at 100% capacity yet, because we haven't discussed it since our hearing last May. On the bottom of page 13, this talks about the Maple Leaf and some pictures that they have, what we make at Maple Leaf Foods at the Lachimodier plant. They talk about the center of bacon excellence. I don't know if they do any other products there. The bacon center, so they had added 73,000 square feet to the Lachimodier plant in 2021. Talks about some facts about the plant. Total number of employees is 1,795. Size of the plant is a bit less than $500,000. We have the actual leasable area at 445,855. Product is sold in Canada, US, and they have their own warehouse and 4 unique plants under one roof. Here's some pictures of the manufacturing process on page 15. And then on page 16 and 16 and 17, the workers and showing the health standards that they pertain to. Valuation. Is everyone on page 18 now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we've done, the leasable area is 445,855 square feet. We've used a rent of $5.14. So how we look at that, we feel that that's a fair market value due to all the expansion that has taken place. So we can't consider this a 1964 building. We consider it a building with 1989 as an overall effective age, which is why I believe that the $5.14 is a fair market rent, because we look at what other plants that are being built today that are brand new. And those rents are almost double that, but we're not going to have a double rent for a much larger building. So we believe that the $5.14 is a fair compromise. We use a 4% vacancy loss. We use expenses at 3%, shortfall of 85 to come up with a net operating income of $2,065,364. We have a cap rate of 7.25% to come up with an overall market value of $28,488,000. Just to confirm, I don't know what this first sentence is on very top, but I would exclude it because I'm not too sure if that's accurate. That's not an accurate statement, and I don't know why I ended up putting it there or what ended up happening. Anyways, 1994. Before 1994, there was 241,376. Since 2008, there's 182,817. So we know when there are new buildings being leased out in the marketplace, that the market rent would be much higher than the $5.14 that we're using. And so what I've done here is I've created a reflection upon 2 different sets of rents here. For newer comparables, what I've done is I got some properties in St. Boniface and some properties in the northwest part of Winnipeg. So the first 2 are in St. Boniface Industrial Park, and we'll be actually talking about these 2 in the next hearing as well. So these areas are 51,000 square feet and 136,000 square feet, and those respective rents are $791 and $820, and those years built are 2001 and 2008. The next 2 and the very last one are properties that are in the northwest quadrant. Those are new properties as well, being built in 2014 for the first 2 on Discovery. Those rents are 49,000 and 60,000 square feet, and those rents are $870 and $995. The very last one is also in St. Boniface Industrial Park. That's 60,000 square feet and $7.50 a square foot. And the very last one is a brand new building that is built in Haggard, and there's actually quite a bit of development in the northwest. These are all brand new buildings for 148,000 square feet, and that rents $10.50. And on the bottom of it, there's a little picture of the building quality at 195 Haggard, just a little subset if you're ever in the Northwest quadrant of the city of Winnipeg. Next on page 20 is what I've done here is I've included larger market rent comparables. So these are all buildings that are north of 100,000 square feet, and they're all across the city of Winnipeg. Sorry about that. I apologize. So those ranges, some of these are older buildings. The very first one was built in 1968. That has a market rent of $4.98. Then we have another property on Fife at $5.07, built in '79. 51 Burmac, built in 1976 at $6.15. Then we got some properties on King Edward at $5.95 at 205,000 square feet. Redwood at $6.95 with Boeing, and there's just the two leases that have taken place with the property on Redwood, where it's 112,000 square feet, built in 1990. And we got additional property on Sony Place, where it's 228,000 square feet, and that's at $6.33. So our approach to the valuation or the market rent is creating a hybrid model of the very old, bigger, and newer properties. What I've done here on page 21 is because this property has a history of appeals, and I'm just showing the range of what we have here. And this is just for information purposes, is that we're looking at some of the agreements that have taken place and some of the values that have taken place. So in 2000, the very first ones are showing a sale of $7.9 million at $29 a square foot at 272. Then there was an expansion that had taken place in 2010, where the sales per square foot or the assessment per square foot was $37.89. There was an agreed upon value in 2014 at $46.61, and some other appeals are in 2018. It was at $48. Initial model value in 2020 was at $50.32. The first supplemental in 2021 was $50.32, and here's the additional supplementals that have taken place to factor in the new building areas. So what ended up happening and the second supplemental on November 2nd, 2021, we were at $59.44. The board cut it to $4.50 a square foot to come up with $51.37. And the same thing took place because the supplemental in 22 were the same. And right now we're at 2023 model value at $28 million at $63.90. And like I had said, the property will be at the municipal board in 2021 and 2022. What I've done here in the past is, and this was a continuation of the brief that I've done in 2022, whereby there was a certificate agreement set up with regards to the details, where in 2006, where the value dropped from almost 9.5 to 8.2, and just an overview of the workup that had taken place. That the blended rent used was $385 for 266,611, but in 2006 they did the new warehouse portion of it, or the warehouse portioning, at $7.40. On page 24 is the cap rate study and some information with regards to the Municipal Assessment Act. And page 26 shows the application process. And on page 29 shows how the income expense mailer was completed and that this is an owner-occupied building. That concludes my formal presentation, and I am open up to questions.
Okay, Mr. Gregory, either you or Mr. Reed can ask questions now.
Thank you. Mr. Froelich, just going to your brief and the photos near the beginning of your brief, particular page 4 and 5. This, you indicated this shows the expansion and
the 2014 work. These pictures are from 2014.
All right, so this facility has been built in phases over time for Maple Leaf's specific operation, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this has never been a multi-tenanted facility. It's been owner occupied.
No, but there have been some multi-tenanted facilities that have become single-use facilities within the city of Winnipeg.
No, I'm just asking about the subject property here. This has been an owner-occupied facility?
Since as long as we know.
Okay. And again, it's been built in phases to the specific needs of Maple Leaf and the processing that is happening in that facility.
Yeah, and I showed that in my summary page on page 21.
All right. And again, as this was being constructed, to your knowledge, was it being constructed in a manner that would accommodate more than one tenant or one occupier?
No, it's a single-use property.
Okay. And it's fair to say that if this property were to be attempted to be leased out for a multi-tenant purpose, there would have to be significant work done to the property to make that happen.
Yeah, or maybe it could be sold and used as a single-tenant property moving forward. It's hard to speculate on what may happen in the future.
Right. So you'd acknowledge it would be, for multi-tenant purposes, if you wanted to chop this building up into smaller pieces, it would require a significant amount of work. Alternatively, you'd have to find another single user, likely a food processor of some kind.
Yeah, I don't know who would be interested in this type of property. I don't have experience.
It would be fair to say it would be a fairly significant challenge to market this property, given the layout and the historical use of it.
Yeah, that's not my expertise, Mr. Mercury.
Well, your expertise here is an assessor in terms of valuing the real estate. So one of the things you would have to keep in mind is the challenges that would go into leasing or marketing the property for sale. Would you not?
It depends upon the buyer, but I'm sure there would be challenges whenever there's a new facility and a new user using the property.
Particular with a facility of this size, correct?
Yes.
And layout.
Yes.
All right. So you then have your articles here, pages 11, 12, and 13. This is the new Bacon Center of Excellence, I think you described it as. But you're aware there was government funding for that?
Well, I knew that the government had made a contribution towards the building expansion. That was shown on page 12.
Right. Okay. Did you take that into account at all in your evaluation?
No, I did not.
All right. Okay. Just moving along to your valuation, starting at page 18. You're using a rent of $5.14. And as I understand your evidence, you're essentially taking a combination of newer rents and older or larger rents, and then using a blended rate of $5.14. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. And so we look at your rental comps for the newer warehouse space. These would all be significantly newer than the subject property, correct?
Only a portion of the building would be significantly older because, as I stated on the top page of page 19, since 2008, 182,817 square feet of this space is essentially built into the 21st century, which would represent a higher rent than the portion that was built before 1994. So I believe that this is a fair approach to do this because of efficiencies in building construction, of ceiling heights, and a variety of other factors. You need to factor in that like almost 40% of this building here. Let me just double check the math here, but maybe 35%. 182 divided by 4. So 182 divided by 445. So we're looking at almost 41% of this building has been built in the 21st century. And to use an artificially low rent for that doesn't give a fair indication.
Okay, when you say artificially low rent, these are these newer rents. You're looking at rents at page 19, Mr. Fullock. Are all of these single occupancy, or are they multi-tenanted buildings?
I do believe that the 195, they are multi-tenanted for 195. They are, but the point is, you're not.
Well, let me just ask.
Let me answer your question though.
Yeah.
Because what happens here is that I'm not seeking an $8 rent. I'm not seeking a $10 rent. My rental rate that we're using is significantly lower for this, and we'll see this in the next property, whereby when we're looking at things, because of the uniqueness of this property, you need to come up with a unique valuation process. And so I'm not saying that these are the templates, because I'm not using this rent share, but I'm just trying. You need to be mindful of the approach that 41% of this building was built in the 21st century,
right?
And the overall market rent has to be representation of that.
Okay, so Mr. Fullock, I ask you to wait because it's not really time for submission. So let's just answer the question at hand, if we could. The 200 Bagan you have as it's built in 2001. Is this an owner-occupied building, or is it a? I'm sorry.
Based on our information, there's a market rent in place.
There's a rent from a 2005 lease start date, so that's 16 years prior to the reference date. Is that typically something you'd rely on?
Well, when it becomes larger properties, it becomes harder to find different rents. I also have newer rents here that are in 2020 and 2015. So it's just, usually what ends up taking place is a person's going to occupy a large space. They're going to want to lock in. They're going to have a fixed rent that they can use for their business model.
Is this building, is it multi-tenanted or one tenant?
I know, just give me 1 sec here, because I'm seeing comparables. So 310-102 has one tenant, and the 350 Debates is a one tenanted building as well.
And the others?
And I know for a fact that Discovery Place is multi-tenanted, and I know that 195 Haggard, that the almost entire building is there's only 2 tenants at 195 Haggard.
Okay. In terms of the physical layout of these buildings, I take it you're generally familiar with them, these 6 properties that you have here?
I have a general understanding, but I haven't inspected any of them.
Okay, it's fair to say that they'd be more traditional, either square or rectangular shaped industrial warehouse buildings? That's correct. Okay, so if we go to the next page, page 20, these are your larger rent comparables.
Yep.
And again, are these multi-tenanted or single-tenant buildings?
Some are single-tenant, some are multi-tenanted. So
right.
McLeod is single, Fife is single, Burmac single. I know at one point 1,000 King Edward was single. I don't know with regards to the upgrades that have taken place. For that, Redwood single, Sony Place is multi-tenanted.
Okay, so Sony Place, I believe, my understanding is that should actually be 1370 Sony. Is that correct? Not 1570?
Yeah, probably.
All right. So we'll get to this in rebuttal, Mr. Fullock, but have you had a chance to look at what rent you've assigned for the business assessment on all of these properties? Because according to our information, that does not match up to what you are using or reporting for your rent per square foot. Have you looked at that?
Unfortunately, Mr. Mercury, as you know this, when people go through the appeal process, we honor the appeal process and the decisions that take place during the appeal process. These are actual rents here. I have no control of whatever happens within the confines of a board of revision hearing. So
Well, I'm not asking about board.
I think let me finish, Mr. Mercury, because I actually think you're mentioning business assessment values, and I thought we're not here to compare assessments. We're just here to look at averages.
Well, first of all, there has been no business assessment appeals as of yet for 2023. So anything that's in the system is the assessor's judgment in terms of what the value, the rental value for these properties are. And so when I look at, for example, 1000 King Edward, which is a very large property of 205,000 square feet, you're reporting a rent of $5.95. And if I were to suggest to you that the assessor is using a rent of $2.78 for that space, would that surprise you?
Well, but what we have through the process, there is a modeling process. We don't use actuals. So what I'm presenting here is the actual lease in place here at $5.95.
Do you have the lease?
I have the income expense mailer.
Okay. Well, do you know why the assessor is using $2.78 if you're reporting a rent of $5.95?
I have not reviewed. I have not reviewed 1000 King Edward.
Okay. Would that not reflect the fact that it's a very large space, and your economies of scale would come into play?
Well, then why are they not? Why is there conflicting information with regards to there's a lease in place of $5.95? I
don't have that information, Mr. Froelich. What I have is what you're reporting.
I could actually look at that if you want me to confirm that, and I may be able to send it to you guys.
We'll get to that in rebuttal. The point is, Mr. Froelich, what you're showing here is not reflective of what the assessor believes market rent actually is.
Mr. Mercury, one thing is you're comparing assessments, and that's not evidence, as you know.
It's not evidence, but Mr. Chairman, this goes to the credibility of the assessor's position. If he's reporting rents at $5.95, $5.07, and so forth, yet he himself is not using those rents on the same property.
That's your argument, Mr. Mercury, but in fact, he says that there's a rent in place, a lease in place, showing that there's a rental being paid at $5.95. That's all that's reported right now, and that's all that we're taking it at.
Well, but with respect, Mr. Chairman, anytime you use a comparable, you have to make adjustments to it depending on whether it's appropriate or fair market. And that's part of the valuation process, Mr. Chairman. So
I know, I just indicated right now what you're doing is you're comparing assessments. So
well, I'm not comparing assessments at all. What we're doing is looking at the business assessment, the rent that is reported here. And I think it's what I'm suggesting to you is that it is misleading for the assessor to put these rents in as good evidence of market when it really is only a small piece of the picture. That's all I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
So maybe I'll continue on with I'm not going to go into that. We will deal with this in rebuttal, but Mr. Froelich, on Redwood, the tenant there, you're showing that's Boeing?
Yes.
And you're showing a lease in January of 2021 of $7.20. You're aware that was the final, that's also Boeing?
Yeah.
All right, so that would be the final year of their holding period before they vacated that property entirely and moved to Murray Park?
That's correct.
All right, so that would not be a typical market transaction, would it? At $7.20.
Oh, but you also got to factor in that there was a sale that was in place for that property at $9.7 million in 2012 that had supported the rental rate that we're using at the time.
Okay, well, I'm just asking you about the rent. I'm not asking about a 2012 sale. I'm asking you about a $7.20 rent in January of 2021. That's not a tip, but that's not what you typically
Mr. Mercury, Mr. Chairperson, I do feel that I'm being badgered here, but for the record, there was a 14-year lease in place.
Yeah, we answered the question already.
Yeah, okay, so thank you.
No, my question was, which he did not answer, was whether you typically use a 1-year rent for a tenant that is vacating the building the following year. Is that what you would typically use?
Mr. Mercury, did you look above the 1-year lease and did you look at the 14-year lease that was signed in January 15, 2008? That's about that.
Yes. So what I'm.
And so to answer your question, no, because I believe to answer your question, you asked me, is it typical to use a 1-year lease? And I'm saying, no, it's not typical, but that's why I included both leases in place here. I showed the previous 14 years at $6.95, and I showed that there was an increase in the marketplace at $7.20.
So you've shown a number of, you like to rely on board orders and certificates of agreement. And are you aware that historically neither the assessor nor the board has used $6.95 for 1345 Redwood?
Like I said, I do believe that the last, just because we have things that are out of our control at the municipal board or at the board revision process. What I'm providing here is that these are the actuals, that's in place, that they send us through the income expense mailer process. So in 2009, 2011, we get mailers from Boeing or from 1344 showing us that the rent's in place here. So I don't know. I don't have much more to add beyond that.
All right. So what you've done to summarize is you've taken large rents larger rents, and to be clear, your largest of the rents that you're using, 1,000 King Edward, is 205,000. That's still less than half the size of the subject property.
I also have a lease in place here for 228,000.
Yes.
4 square feet.
Again, that would be approximately half the size.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And those two properties, again, in terms of physical layout, King Edward and Sony would be much more traditional industrial warehouse spaces than what we're talking about here. Correct?
Correct.
All right. So again, we spoke earlier about the cost to convert. Again, you did not factor any of those costs into your analysis and in your income valuation, correct?
No, I did not.
All right. You referenced at pages 22 and 23 the certificates of agreement, and then you have, I believe you reported on a history of values. Yeah, that was the prior page in 2021. Do you place weight on certificates of agreement in terms of the present valuation?
What I do is I provide that as a baseline history, whereby we know that most property values haven't gone down in the city of Winnipeg. So we're not expecting a significant, we know that improvements have been made to the building overall. We know that there's 182,000 square feet of new space here. And we believe that we're presenting a value that's fair. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but I use that as a guideline. I don't set it in stone because we know there are a lot of situations that take place in the marketplace whereby tax agents will advocate for a lower value at a hearing. Meanwhile, it is sold for significantly higher than what we have it assessed at. Well, just let me finish here. Similar to the argument that you're making here, whereby we may have a model rent, but the actual rent is much higher than the model rent that we're using. We have no control over, what happens at a hearing.
So I'm a little confused, Mr. Froelich. Are you saying that you do rely on assessments and board orders, or you do not? Which one is it?
What we do is it's a guideline that we have that it's in the back of my mind. So when a tax agent will come in, and we always know that things evolve. We use it as a guideline, but with a lot of things in the assessment profession, there's a lot of gray in our world. Nothing's black or white. So your answer is not yes or no. Okay. So did you take as a guideline the certificate of agreement on 99 Murray Park Road as a guideline for this property, which was actually on this docket? That's every evaluation is site specific. And so when we're looking at 99 Murray Park Road, there are different characteristics with regards to that building, what we have here. With regards to 99 Murray Park Road, I believe it's underassessed, but it's a value that that was agreed upon by the agent and by the assessment and taxation department.
You used a rent of 406 for that property, correct?
I don't have that in front of me right now.
Okay. And a cap rate of 8%?
You know what? Was that in 2020 or 2023?
It's the current cycle.
You know what? I would have to check my records on that.
All right, very well. The cap rate that you're using here is 7.25%. That's just the model based, is it, Mr. Fuller?
That is model based, yes.
Okay, so just looking at your page 24, these are your, so you have the city of Winnipeg parameters.
Yes.
And so you're showing a range for industrial buildings of 5.55 to 7.45.
Yeah.
At the high end. And so are you able to provide any greater detail as to how you fit this particular property, this large manufacturing facility in at 7.25 when we look at this range?
I think what ends up happening factors in the fact that 41% of the buildings built in the 21st century.
So there's just like the age issue alone really, which drove you down?
Effective age affects cap rates, so we're not using a 1964 building age for this property. We're using a 1989 building age for this property. So considering that 41% of the building was built in the 21st century, that impacts the effective age, affects the cap rate.
Right. So, but there's a lot of other factors other than effective age that affect the cap rate, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Including location, physical layout, just the manner in which it's built, correct?
Correct.
Did you, when you looked at the overall valuation of this, Mr. Fullock, did you consider the history of the other former Maple Leaf plant at 1 Warman Road?
No, I did. I did a site spin. Well, I didn't do. This is a model generated value based on the history that I learned upon this building from the last cycle, and you know, there's a high sale and there's a low sale for the Warman Road property. So I didn't. I did for this appeal. I did not look at it or put any weight on it.
Okay. Subject to any follow-up questions from the board. Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all the questions of the applicant?
Yeah.
I know Mr. Bailey's there.
I think that is the Robert. You don't have any questions, do you?
No, I think you covered everything of concern. There are some things where I believe the assessor has not categorize things properly, and I don't know if I will get to those in my report.
Yes, right now you have some questions. If you don't have any other questions, that's fine. You know, have an opportunity to saying whatever your argument is later on.
Right. Yeah, I think it's better presented in my discussing my report, but I do have some areas of disagreement with some of the basic facts as presented.
The fact that you're here, you know, I'm not surprised that. That's expected in all applications. Yes.
Is there water available?
Oh yeah, it's so send to that.
Okay.
Something. I'll get you.
Okay, just because my voice is.
Just give me a
minutes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay. Do you need to answer?
No, I'm ready to answer your questions.
Okay, Ms. Stevens, any questions, Mr. Foley?
Yes. So this was touched on by the applicant, but the fact that the properties that you've provided as comparables here are significantly a different size, and than the building we're looking at, and then in your own presentation and answering questions, you've referred to the property as being unique several times. So I'm just confirming that I know that you just confirmed that the cap rate was model driven, and the rent was as well.
Yes.
So did you give any consideration to overriding any of that, given the fact that there are some unique characteristics of this building that may not have been picked up by the model?
Well, say hypothetically, if I would have changed the rent to $5, the process would be they would ask for a rent that was much lower than ours, right? So my valuation process needed to have a hybrid approach, and no matter what I changed, knowing the environment that we're in, I overall believe that this is a fair market value based on my approach to valuation. And if I changed it to 20 cents lower or 50 cents lower, then the assessment would go lower. So just based on my experience. So I'm comfortable with the rent that we're using at $5.50.
Okay, so I just want to be clear that I understand what you're saying, that if that knowing that the applicant may come in at a lower number regardless of what you do, you're going with what the model says.
Well, but also based on my evidence, 41% of this building has been built in the 21st century. So that means 41% of the overall market valuation needs to be higher than, overall $5 a square foot. So what we have here. So if you did the two approaches to value, so just right, hypothetically speaking here, right? If we went through the exercise that we did the 40%, 60% ratio here, right? So it's a good question you're asking here. And so, for example, here, so if we got $4 times just bear with me here for 1 second. I got to find my valuation. Okay, so if we got $4, so we got $4 times. Just go 292291695 equals times 0.4. It's 917,878. So minus 2,291,695. So we got 1,373,817. Oh, I think I did this wrong, but just you know what?
Sorry, you know what? I don't.
But no,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I need that. I think I understand what you're saying.
Because 40% will be higher. So just go 137, just right one. See, I did that wrong, just because of time constraints. But overall, what I want to say though is that everyone understands here, right? I can't solely look at older building leases here, and because this is a complicated property, I'm fully mindful that it's a unique property. But the point is, we can't ignore the fact that 40% of this building was built in the 21st century, and somehow that has to be reflected either in the market rent or the cap rate. Thank you.
Okay. I understand your answers, and that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, do you have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Pollack, you're very familiar with this property, and unfortunately, I'm not that familiar with it. But so I just want to get a little familiar with this property. So I'm looking at the assessments, and in 2021 there was a assessment of 18.3 million, and then there was a supplementary of $1 million, increasing it from 18.3 to 19.3. So I note that the added square footage was like 21,000 square feet for $1 million. What can you tell us about that?
So what happened here, and Robert would know this better than I would, but I think there was one additional expansion that had taken place that was not as large, because if we look I need to find my summary page, thank you. Okay, so we're looking at 2021. Okay, so as you go through this process here, the square footages here, right? Mr. Bailey and I spent a lot of time looking at the square footages, and with some of these square footages that were in existence here, some of them were based on our numbers, and some of them, and they've been changed and modified to match what the applicant has. So that's why there's a difference in the square footages. And but there was a slight building area change.
So, Mr. Frolick, you added 21,000 square feet.
Yeah.
For $1 million.
Yeah.
What exactly was that? Can you tell us the cost, or, it looks like the assessed value went up by $1 million.
Yeah.
And it relates to 21,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Okay. So what took place there? Because as we go along, you're adding square footage and increasing the values.
Yeah.
So just briefly, can you tell us what happened at the $1 million level?
I will in a sec. I think there's a reason why I like to not work here. Because there's one of these questions that I'm just scared. Just give me 1 second.
Okay, but along that line, you come along here, then in 21, another mental, okay, and it went up to 19, okay? So you added another 20,000 square feet. Then you come along and you go from 19.3 to 27.4, okay? So you have another $8 million.
Yep.
So, and you added more square footage.
Yep.
16, 78,000,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yep.
Okay. So, but you talked about, the Bacon area.
Yeah.
70,000.
Yeah.
Square foot.
Yeah.
So where does that come into play?
Okay. When you're looking at the square footages, Mr. Barrett, one thing that needs to be looked at is that the square footages that we had that were higher than what the applicant had were saying, right?
Yeah,
So if we're going from our 2021, so right now we're at 445, correct? 445. So
okay.
445
Okay.
minus let's just say the original 2020 value of 363. So what happens here, we have 82,000 square feet here, right? And so what has happened here is based on discussion, because I do believe, because I don't have access to it, there was additional permit where the area had increased, and Mr. Bailey could answer that. But what we're looking at here is from the 2020 original model value, there's 82,000 square feet. And then we have 70,000 square feet, but I think in the press listing, they said 78,000 square feet. So with regards to square footages, where we're at in 2023, I'm more confident than we are before I took over this file. Hopefully that answers your question.
So the second sub went to 27.5.
Yep.
The board cut it to 23.7.
Yeah.
And because of the rents.
Yeah.
And who took the values and questions to the municipal board?
The agent did.
The agent did. Okay. And that's all the questions that I have. Thank you very kindly.
Sorry if I was a bit sort of.
No, that's fine.
I'm looking at the cap rate right now.
Yep.
So that's an issue here. And I see that the city of Winnipeg has the cap rate study, the model uses. I guess in some way, I'm not sure how. But I look at industrial properties, and they're all such the same. If they're A, B, multi or single, at a low of 5.55, and at 20 percentile, and 7.45, the 8 percentile. And I'm just wondering how this property fits into that.
Well, the thing is, and I had this question by another panel member. It's It's hard to develop cap rates for properties within the city of Winnipeg that are more than 100,000 square feet, because there's not a lot of transactions at that level. So when we looked at the cap rate that we had used here, effective age is a determining factor. So we have some factors that end up taking place here, right? We've got a very large building here that affects cap rate. We have a building where 41% of it has been built in the 21st century. That affects cap rate. Newer buildings have lower cap rates than older buildings. So being mindful of that fact, the 7.25% that we're using here is not within the normal parameters here, but this property is not a normal property. Hopefully that answers your question.
So the model somehow picks that up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the model generates it. If we had the effective age at 1970 or at even 79, 10 years older, the cap rate would be higher.
Okay.
Just like, here's a great example. I had this appeal with Mr. Newman with a bank. We had a bank at 4,900 square feet, and the cutoff was 5,000 square feet for cap rates. So Mr. Newman was advocating for a higher cap rate based on size. Well, if I change the dividing line to 5,100 square feet, then you'd say there's a new line. So you got to draw a line in the sign, in the line. They'll draw the line in the sand somewhere. So
We'll hear what the applicant has to say.
okay.
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Fuller, some water. Maybe we'll just take a minute and
Thank you.
recess to get some water, and then we can have Mr. Murphy go on with his report, his evidence.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just before we break, we had some rebuttal information which I've emailed to the board. I'd like to get it to Mr. Froelich, obviously, as well. Just want to make sure which email address is the appropriate one to send it to.
Yeah, I got that.
I'm sorry?
I got that email.
You did. Okay, good. And as long as Mr. Froelich can, I can send it directly to him, or however it's accessible to him is fine with me. But if you need me to resend, I can do that.
No problem. I'll send it to
We can make it accessible.
Okay.
Thank you. So just 1 minute and we'll go right back. Thank you. Okay, we can go on. So Mr. Mercury, do you want to present your rebuttal now, or do you want to wait and do it after?
I think we can present, Mr. Bailey will proceed with his report, and then he can deal with his rebuttal at the end, or however he feels it's best to deal with it. So how we intended to proceed was to just introduce Mr. Bailey, and he's very familiar with this facility, having valued it several times over the course of the last number of years. But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bailey and allow him to take us through his report if we could.
Okay, we'll go to his report, and that's fine. Proceed then, Mr. Bailey.
What?
No, not yet.
Okay, I'll be coming shortly.
Just waiting for the rebuttal brief.
Okay. Well, you're gonna
Yeah, we're
commence.
going to do the other one though. Okay.
As long as you have it like that.
Yeah, I don't have it yet. Okay, thank you. I just got it.
Mr. Bailey, you proceed when you're ready to report.
Very good. If we could, I'm going to cover a little of the ground for a second time. If we could start in my report at page 3, you'll see I have tried to photograph the building from all sides, and I wanted to draw the board's attention to a couple factors, and that is that as you can see from the pictures, it is a large building. And when you look at the pictures, there are at least 4 or 5 different building sections in each of the photographs. Each of these building sections was built at a separate time. There are, in fact, 13 separate dates of construction where various building sections were built. This facility has also had a number of demolitions out over the years. The building has changed purpose from being a slaughter and cut operation to simply being a further processing facility. And all of that has happened over its 58-year life. Maple Leaf acquired the property in 1996 and has been making a lot of changes over the years to the purpose of the property. So on page 4, I've put in a site plan or an aerial photograph, and I've colored in the building. As you can see, it's a very irregular shaped building. As I said, built in 13 time periods and probably close to 20 building sections. And it is highly irregular. It's built the way it's built because as they've added to the building, they've had to take old building away. And I believe that the assessor has misstated the average age of the building. 60% of the building is built before 2000, rather than 40%. And if you look at my addenda tab B, you'll see all of the ages of the various building sections there. And unfortunately, they're not added up. I had intended to add it all up for you. In fact, I did, but unfortunately, what I put in the addenda does not show that calculation. But it approximately 45% of the building is original 1964 building. About 13% was built in the 1990s, and about 40% has been built since 2000. So I wanted to correct that. I think the assessor just got the two numbers reversed.
I don't think so.
So 60% of the building is built before 2000. And you know, again, the average age is about 1990. I have it as 1991. The assessor has it as 1989. So the average is in around that age. It is not a typical building because of the nature of the layout of the building. I haven't been able to find any buildings in Winnipeg that are quite as piecemeal. It is also obviously one of the larger buildings in Winnipeg. And there are very few examples where whole buildings like this have leased. And I wanted to discuss very briefly a couple things because Maple Leaf has had some experience with buying and selling these buildings. One of the properties that they sold was 1 Warman Road, which was about 100,000 square foot building, so about a quarter of the size of this building. It's newer than this building, built in 1997, but it took them 4 years of having the building on the market to finally sell it. They listed it in 2011, sold it in 2015. Despite our appeals, the building sold at about half the assessment. The new owner of the building spent several years converting the building for multi-purpose, multi-tenant use, and was trying to lease out the building when they got an unsolicited offer to sell the building, which they did sell. However, that owner has since resold the building again at a price, and it's post-reference date, but again, it's at a price that's less than half the assessed value of the property. Maple Leaf has also bought another building. They bought it in 2019, and it will be before the board as well. And again, it's a food processing facility, 50,000 square feet, and you'll hear about it in a little more detail. But again, the previous owner sold the building. The building sold at about 2/3 of the assessed value. So it is very difficult to market these types of buildings, I guess is the point I'm trying to make. It's a very unusual building in that it doesn't set, it's a highly irregular building, so it'd be hard to find a user for the whole property that would be happy with the configuration of the building. It's extremely irregular. Even another food processor would spend a lot of money trying to convert this, and it's unlikely they could find another food processor who could use the whole facility, even with the modifications, because of its irregular nature. Maple Leaf is one of the largest meat processors in Canada, and I don't think any of the other large meat processors would. They all have superior facilities to this facility in terms of the layout of the building. So it presents a lot of problems. It would present a lot of problems for marketing, and any investor would look at it knowing that it would take years to lease and years to sell, and there'd be a great deal of risk. Again, I think we've heard a little bit about the construction. I've given you a little more details in terms of the three main stages of the construction. It's a facility that's very uneven in that sense, because 45% of the building is now past its economic life. So we've got 55% that still should have some of it's near brand new, built in 2021. So it's very mixed in that sense as well. You'll see in my report, I give you a bit more of a breakdown of the changes in the property over time. On page, find the page of this report. So on page 8 of my report, I give you a little synopsis showing that some of the what the ideal facility for even Maple Leaf's current production would be, and how different it is, and what the additional costs would be in terms of running the building due to the configuration and construction of this building. As I mentioned, there's 21 different building sections, where ideally they'd have 2 to 4 building sections. It's highly irregular, where they would much prefer a rectangular building where the process started at one end of the building and went to the other, whereas in this building, product is going in every direction throughout the building, which for a meat facility is very problematic, because you need to keep your finished product away from your raw product to avoid contamination. The building is built with various types of construction, which add both to the maintenance costs, and the older sections are by far less than ideal in terms of what they would like to see as construction of a building. And the building heights vary so considerably. In some areas, they're very restricted because of the low heights. So again, it presents problems to the current owner, as well as any other potential owner of the building. It's very difficult to find large leases. I've looked at leases from about just over 100,000 square feet up, and the largest lease in this time frame that I found was 283,000 square feet, and it was in a building that, though older than the subject, was built in stages, was a single user building that has where the money has been spent to divide it up into multiple units. And that is, if you look on page 11, that is 770 Pandora. My comparable number 3. And you can see that though this lease is somewhat dated now, it is nowhere near, didn't lease anywhere near the $5.14 that the assessor's putting on this building. So I presented a very different set of leases. I found 11 large leases, 12 large leases. I think only one of the properties are common between myself. No, 2 properties are common between myself and the assessor. But I don't think we've used the same units. So in 1155, I believe we both used that. Though I have a different lease in that building than the assessor has, and comparable 1000 King Edward. Again, I have a separate tenant in that building who took 139,000 square feet at a substantially lower rate than the. I believe the assessor used the Manitoba Liquor and Lottery Corporation's lease of 228,000 square feet, which I was not aware of at the time of this report. I believe it was $5.95 a square foot. So again, even within the same building, leases are at different rates. For the large buildings, quite often, particularly older buildings, the owners will take whatever they can get on the market if they've got a large tenant. So I've come my median rent based on the 12 comparables and the larger sales is $350 a square foot, and my average is $396 a square foot. And based on these leases, I felt that a rate of $385 a square foot was represented what I believe the market for the building as a whole would be as of the reference date. I did, for past cycle, I did look at the costs of breaking the building up, and they would almost exceed the what I believe the value of this property is. So you have to look at this building as a single unit, because right now that's all it is. It would cost a great deal of money to divide it up. And so my rent is a blended rate based on the entire facility leasing as one facility, which I believe is appropriate given the capital costs in converting it. I looked at the capitalization rate as well, because of, I believe this property would be highly risky for an investor. And I believe that the ranges of capitalization rates, which I've included in the addenda of this report, I've looked at the capitalization rates for the 3 major brokerages, CBRE, Cushman Wakefield and Colliers, and I believe a rate slightly above their normal range of rates would make sense for the subject, given the amount of risk. It still falls within the assessor's range of rates. I believe he's got the range of rates in his report as well. You'll find them in the addenda to my report. And I believe the rates that were quoted before, the range of rates was the 20 percentile to 80 percentile range. I believe, given the uniqueness of this property, it would be above those that median range of 20 to 80%, and I've concluded a cap rate of 7.75%. And again, if you look at my evaluation on page 14, I've accepted the assessor's vacancy and vacancy shortfall and expense allowances, and it produces a value of $19,739,000, which represents a value of $44.27 per square foot. And I believe when you look at the sale prices of both 41 Paquin, which is a property that Maple Leaf bought in 2019, and the sale price of 1 Warman Road, which is a property that Maple Leaf sold in 2014, I think you'll find that rate per square foot is reasonably close, given the size differences to what the market was telling us this type of building would go for. The other two buildings are both rectangular food processing facilities. This one is highly irregular and is 4 to 8 times the size of those two properties. And that concludes my direct evidence. If you will turn to my rebuttal report, I found that, and if we go to page 2 of the report, I have gone through the assessor's comparables. And first of all, I believe that 2 of his comparables are not arm's length rentals. 861 McLeod was part of a sale leaseback. And again, I'm always suspicious of sale leasebacks because basically it's a trade-off. One party may want a higher sale price, whereas another party may want a lower one. And the way they deal with that is they compromise on the rent. So if the seller wants more money, they take on a higher rent. And if they want less money, they take on a lower rent. So again, I don't believe a sale leaseback is a good indication of market rent. And that's what McLeod, 861 McLeod was. I also looked at 51 Burmack, which I do not believe was an arm's length transaction, in that the tenant in there is Monarch Industries. The lease is held by a part owner of Monarch Industries. I believe it's V&R Capital. So they are a venture capital group who have bought a portion of Monarch Industries to try to make it more profitable, and they appear to be the lease holder in this case as well. So again, it's not what I would consider a market rent. Same situation. They bought shares in the company for a given price, so the rent becomes a negotiation as part of the balance between what they're buying and what they're renting. So it's very difficult to say whether it truly represents market. So again, we're left with a number of comparables. Fife, which again, the assessor has found a newer lease in the building that I wasn't aware of. It's a superior property to the subject. It's substantially smaller. The unit which leased is about 60% of the building. It's got superior building heights, and it's a far superior layout. It's a nice rectangular building, which we'll see a picture of both from the street and aerial further in my rebuttal brief. Redwood, again, is the 2008 lease is a dated lease. The lease rate was substantially higher than market at the time of lease due to the substantial amount of tenant inducements put into the building to induce Boeing to locate there. The final lease was a 1-year extension. They'd had hoped to get out of the building sooner, but found they couldn't. So they took on an additional year. I don't think I don't believe it represents market. I think I mentioned King Edward, where I found it's certainly a better location. It's the Manitoba Liquor and Lottery Corporation took a much smaller, 205,000 square feet, which is half the size of the subject. It's a nice rectangular area within the building. I understand that there were some renovations done to accommodate the tenant in that building. 1,000 King Edward was formerly a single user building. For years, it was the Safeway distribution warehouse. So it was a warehouse, and slowly they're dividing it up for multiple tenants, putting in, I guess, the required tenant improvements to divide up the building as they acquire tenants. It's my belief that the building now has 4 to 5 tenants in it and still has some vacant space, though I understand there was a very recent lease of another 94,000 within the building. Sony Place is a very nicely laid out building. Again, this is the largest unit within the building. There are approximately 4 tenants in the building. It was originally a warehouse for a large hardware entity, and it has been broken up into the 4 units. Brewers Retail, Brewers Distributor, the landlord put a lot of tenant improvements in 2008 to accommodate the tenant. It's a somewhat dated lease now, as you'll see. And I believe that the lease rate is reflective of the tenant improvements that the landlord put in. generally, a landlord will try to recover all of the tenant improvements in the lease rate over the course of the lease. In this case, we're looking at a 15-year lease over which they're trying to recover the costs of the tenant improvements that were put in. So again, I believe it's a superior property, and I believe the lease rate is relatively high because of the tenant inducements that were put in to attract the tenant, which included cooling the entire, putting air conditioning in the entire facility, and making some other interior changes, renovating the space for the tenant. As I said, it's a much smaller area than the subject. It's got superior building heights than the majority of the subject space, where the average height is approximately 21 feet. So those are the large rents that the assessor was relying on. I've looked at the smaller, newer properties that the assessor has put in as, and again, I don't. None of them, if you look at the percentage of space that lease, the largest of these newer leases is 33%, the size of the subject. That's 195 Haggart Street. This is not comparable in the lease to the subject. It's a trucking terminal. The market for trucking terminals is extremely different than that for general purpose properties. It's a very hot market at the moment for trucking terminals. It's located in an area where the majority of the other trucking facilities in Winnipeg are located. It was a brand new facility at the time that, and I haven't been able to substantiate whether it was built for the Manitoba government or whether they were found as a tenant after the fact. But they moved in as soon as the building was built. Again, I don't feel that that's a representative lease in any way. And again, the next largest lease is a very dated lease. Again, a lot of tenant improvements were put in to accommodate the manufacturer's process at the time, and I believe that the lease rate is reflective of all of those costs that were done specific to the end user, who produces packaging material. The other three leases are all, I guess the largest of which is less than 14% the size of the subject. While these are newer spaces, there really is no comparison between these properties, which are multi-tenant buildings. They're modern. They're built specifically for multi-tenant use, though one of them is now occupied by a single tenant who has taken over the space in pieces. Again, they're just not comparable in any way. They tend to have much superior clear heights. They're regular buildings, easily subdivided for the tenants, built with a view of being able to subdivide them to suit tenant needs. And I don't believe they're relevant in determining a rent for the subject. If we go to the next couple pages of my rebuttal, you'll see aerial photographs, the first and street views of these buildings, as you'll see in the photographs, the first one being 861 McLeod. This is the closest property to the subject in that it was in fact built in stages, but even it is reasonably rectangular. As you can see, it has reasonable clear heights, and is much smaller than the subject, not really comparable. And again, as I said, the lease of this property was not arm's length. It was a sale leaseback by the owner. The next property is 155, built all at one time, built for, but has since been split for multi-tenant. But again, it's a nice rectangular building, easily subdivided for multi-tenant use. Good access all the way around the building, which the subject does not have, so that trucks can get into the two units easily without disturbing the other unit. Here we see that, again, while the assessor has a lease at a much higher rate, the assessor also put a much lower rental value on this property than the actual lease for unknown reasons. Potentially, again, having to do with their opinion of the market value of the property. Redwood, as we discussed, was a long-term lease, early date, 15 years ago, with a 1-year holdover, negotiated separately. Again, fairly regular shaped building. The lease rate generated largely by the tenant improvements that were put in. Again, despite the close to $7 leases on the property, the assessor's view of market value was $615 a square foot for the market rent of this property. Next property along is 51 Burmac. Again, not an arm's length lease in that the lessor is part owner of the lessee's business. So again,
excuse me, you indicated all this before when you were giving us your evidence. This is rebuttal now, and
yes,
you want to show us the shape of the building, so we remember what you said before, and so we're just wasting time you repeating it. I've been letting you go up to this point.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear what you said.
I was saying that this is rebuttal. I think you can show us the shape of the buildings and why they're different than the subject property, and that's fine. But you're just repeating evidence you already gave us on your primary.
Okay, sorry. I'll just I'll confine.
We just have the time to shoot straight.
Right.
And you trust us that we remember what you said.
Very good. So again, very regular shaped building, lots of land around it for easy access. Again, street view shows a very regular building. And again, the assessor's view of market rent on this was below the actual rent being achieved for reasons unknown.
I know you said it before. We have that.
Yeah. Okay. 1,000 King Edward, again from a little less regular, but again ample street frontage to give access to the multiple tenants. Again, generous lot, so that there is substantial area around the lot for access and trailer storage. Finally, we have 1370 or 1570 Sony Place. Again, quite a regular shaped building, easily accessed from all around the building. And that's really my rebuttal evidence on for 875 Jamoje.
Thank you. Mr. Fuller, do you have any questions?
Yeah, for starters though, pardon me, I noticed in the applicant's rebuttal evidence, he actually included the 15-1 signed on 99 Murray Park Road. I'd like to have that removed because I've been told by the board revision process that we're not supposed to include 15-1s in actual evidence.
So if I could speak to that, because that was, I included that. The assessor has 15-1s in his material. And to the extent that we're looking at what the assessor believes is fair rent for larger space, this was an agreement that was reached with the city, and the rent was $406 and the cap was 8%. So it shouldn't be a matter of dispute if the assessor wants to say there's discrepancies in terms of the difference in those buildings. That's not an issue, but I don't see how it's irrelevant.
It's about a protocol.
Okay, well, it wasn't drawn for attention for, and I was even looking at it, so
Okay.
you brought it to my attention.
Okay, no problem. It's just
So,
So yeah,
no problem.
that was so just to be clear, because that was a document Mr. Bailey won't be as familiar with, but I can speak to. But it's the assessment of the 99 Murray Park Road for 2023. It's a approximately 663,000 square foot facility in Murray Industrial Park. Mr. Froelich and I both went through that property. It's a much more regularly shaped building. There's a well over 100,000 square feet that is new within the last, I believe, 5 years constructed. But they're clearly and appropriately, I would suggest, by the assessment department, a recognition that when you have such a large facility like that, that will be reflected in the rental rate. You're certainly not going to see a rental rate of over $5, and the assessor used $406, and we felt that was reasonable. The cap rate was initially 7.05, I believe. It had been adjusted to 8%. And again, appropriately, because when you look at a building of this size, that has to be reflected in the cap rate. And so when we look at the subject property, the assessor is using $7.25, I believe, for the cap rate. That really isn't reflective of the risk that would be involved in not only a larger building, but one that is specially purpose-built, constructed in I think with 21 different buildings over time. I would suggest that the Maple Leaf facility would be even more challenging to lease out and ultimately market than a property in a Murray Industrial Park. So that's the reason we brought it in. We'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Mr. Froelich, you're asking questions now.
Yep, thank you.
And if you have any questions to Mercury, just direct them.
Okay, no problem.
Asking it up.
Okay, well, Mr. Mercury would understand that, said Mr. Bailey. So is a negotiated settlement indicative of market rent? When two parties agreed to a rent being used on the property?
Well, it's indicative of what the assessment department believes is proper rent for a large facility. And when you use a $4.06 rent, it's surprising to us that an assessor is using.
I'm referencing 1345 Redwood because I was in Mr. Bailey's brief.
1345 Redwood is a completely different situation in the sense that was negotiated in 2008. It is certainly an anomaly and is not a rent that the assessment department or agents, to my knowledge, have used for industrial warehouse facilities. That's also a building that is less than 1/4 the size of the subject. So I don't know how relevant that particular rent would be.
Well, but also it's 30% difference in what we're using and what the actual rent is as well.
Okay,
Right.
Mr. Froelich,
Thank you.
said, yeah,
Yeah,
you want
I understand.
I'll give you a break to sum up.
Okay.
These questions are.
No problem. Mr. Bailey had made a question here that I had troubles understanding what was stated. So on page 19 of my brief, and on page 21 of my brief, in 2006, the total area used for the subject property Because I had stated that 40% of this building was built in the 21st century. And what I heard from Mr. Bailey, and maybe I heard this wrong, and if I do so, I apologize, but a lot of my thought process is, in 2006, the area for the entire building was 266,611. Now we're dealing with 445,855. So to me, that's a 40% difference in area. So when we presented our information today, we're saying that 40% of this building was built in the 21st century. So did that contradict your presentation, Mr. Bailey?
I believed you'd said that 60% was built in the 21st century, but if I'm mistaken, I'm mistaken.
I just want to make sure that you understand that. Okay, thank you. And so, with regards to the rents that were used by Mr. Bailey, he's acknowledged some.
You're asking questions
Yeah,
now.
yep, exactly. Okay. So, Mr. Bailey, are you familiar that 1725 Sargent is owner occupied?
Is owner occupied?
Yes.
I'm just turning to my notes on that. Offhand, yes, I am. I'm familiar with that. Yes.
Okay, just double checking. Do you know what the current lease is on 680 Mission?
The most recent lease that I'm familiar with is the 2015 lease.
Okay, so just for your information, the current lease is $4.50.
Very good.
Okay. I didn't use Pandora. In 1750 Inkster Boulevard, you have a lease stated here at $3.48. That tenant's no longer there, but do you have any other comparables for leases in 1750 Inkster that you could have used?
I was not aware that that RS Distribution was gone from Inkster. I believe the last time I checked was earlier this year, and they were still a tenant in that building.
Well, based on the 2020 mailer that I had access to, I didn't find them as a tenant. But I found one tenant at $5.50, occupying 134,644 square feet.
Again, I believe there are two tenants in that building, or there were two tenants in that last building. Last I checked earlier this year, and one of the tenants had started off with a much smaller space, and through several lease extensions had increased the space within the building. The last sorry, I think I'm confusing Inkster and Mountain here.
No, you know what? In fairness, Mr. Bailey, you are correct at 1750 Inkster Boulevard. There have been multi-league tenants, and there have been new changes to that. And so the current space has been expanded, and the most recent lease was at 550. So you don't have to add any more if you don't want to.
No, again, and I am unaware of the expansion of that space. Again, the 2015 lease was the most recent lease I was familiar with.
Okay. How familiar are you with 1093 Sherwin Road?
Reasonably familiar.
Okay. So do you know the breakdown of the ages and the wall heights of that building?
Not off the top of my head, but it has not had any recent additions to it. I do know that.
Yeah. So the current lease in place there is $3.40 for your information, and roughly speaking, there's no part of that building that was built after 1979. Are you aware of that?
That would be consistent with what I've seen, but I was not aware of it.
So wouldn't that impact market rent? Wouldn't a newer building with higher ceiling heights affect the rent being used?
Well, again, this is an older building, and I agree. I would expect a lower rent because of its age, but again, it's only a third of the size of the subject, and again, that would put its rent pretty much back at what I'd expect this building to rent at.
Okay. Do you know what the current lease is at 1155?
1155. I noticed that you have a different lease rate. Again, the 2017 lease is the only one that I was familiar with at the time of writing.
Yeah, for sure. And do you know what the current lease is? Because you have a 2017 lease on 1450 Mountain. Do you know what the current lease is at?
Again, this is the most recent lease that I was familiar with.
So for the record, it's $5.70.
Okay, and again, keeping in mind this is a quarter the size of the subject.
I understand completely. So with all these discrepancies here that I've mentioned, would that not affect the mean and the median rent that you've used here today for a market rent for this building?
Yeah, I've taken into account that these. I don't show the median and average date of lease, but it's somewhere around 2017. I've taken into account that the market rents have increased in Winnipeg since then. I would question how much a property as large as the subject, how much the rental rate on that would have increased. But there's been a great demand for smaller spaces and growing. And over time, those areas that demand has been for have been increasing in size. But still, there's really very, very limited demand for facilities 400,000 square feet and over. And I don't believe that the market rents have increased substantially for those larger buildings.
Okay, so what I've done for my own purpose, and no one has access to this, based on the actuals and what you presented here as a rent is $3.85. And I didn't include the ones that I didn't feel confident in, but there's approximately a 40.
No, you're asking questions right now.
Okay, yep. And so and this is so hard for me to understand, or for you to explain this or to answer this succinctly. But with these discrepancies that I've found, would you believe that the rent should increase by more than $3.85 and be significantly higher than what you presented here? Because
no, I understand that there have been some increases in the leases since the dates of some of the lease information that I received. But I'm still comfortable with rent somewhere in the range of the $3.85 that I've put in my report.
And you had mentioned, and we haven't talked about it lots, but we've both been exposed to it. Are you familiar with the recent sale at 1 Warman Road that has taken place?
The sale at $5.7 million?
No, the more recent sale that occurred in 2022.
Are we looking at 2022 sales, Mr. Fuller?
The reason why I answer this is because I fully acknowledge.
If it's post reference stage, we want to hear it.
Yeah, but what's an indication though, and why I believe it's important, is that when we look at the overall valuation process, we want to be fair and consistent.
I understand, but we want to have a valuation I understand. It'd be available to an appraiser at the date that this property should have been appraised.
But there was such a discrepancy between. So prior to the $5 million sale, Mr. Bailey, what did the property sell for?
I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it was substantially more, but when the property sold, it was not on the market for sale. It wasn't truly market sale. It was sold to a marijuana company looking for a large space quickly to set up, and they were approaching properties that were not for sale, and they paid a premium based on that.
Yeah, and so okay, I think to expedite this process, that concludes questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you have any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Stevens, do you have any questions?
I just have one question. So based on the last evaluation you put on this property, you've come up significantly in your value. So what overall in your mind would have changed?
Well, I believe that the rents have come up, and that was the most significant factor that I did change. I don't believe that the capitalization rate would have changed substantially in this property since the 2018 market-based cycle. I believe that the capitalization rate would have stayed relatively stable for this type of property.
When you were looking at the current leases that were in front of you for other properties, that's what you based increasing the rent on?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And keeping in mind that some of these properties may have released, and I'm cognizant that the lease rates have been increasing on a yearly basis in Winnipeg.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you.
And I have a further question. So this matter has ended, and we can go on with the property at 41 Patlin Road.
Could we take a quick recess for water?
And we'll take 5 minutes. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Bullock, we're now dealing with 441 Patlin Road. That's agenda item number 8. Can you receive me ready?
Thank you. File number is 22-376. Roll number 060531 25500. The assessed value that we have for this property is $6,048,000. Property was built in 1994. It's in the new-ish St. Boniface Industrial Park area. Wall height is 25 feet. We have a leasable area of 52,403, and we're asking for the assessment needed to confirm. Property owner has been has completed the income expense mailer, and you'll notice on the subject sale history there was a sale for $3.8 million. As we've been told by agents, one sale doesn't make a market, and based on the data that I'm presenting here today, I believe that sale is not a true indication of market value. Mr. Mercury had taken the time out of his busy schedule to do an inspection with me for this property, and it was much appreciated. As you can see on page 2, there is a picture of the subject property. And then on the top of page 3, it's the general location of it. So it's just off Dougal Road in the St. Boniface Industrial Park. A lot of the properties that are in this area were built in the either the 1990s or 2000, originally 1990s and now 2000. So it's a newer industrial park, relatively speaking, to the 1970s vintage of the Inkster Industrial Park. On page 3 is an overhead picture of the property. And on page 4 is just a picture of the Maple Leaf Foods and the greeting area, which is on the second floor, and the gateway to the office. Just for the record, there is second floor space of approximately 8,000 square feet or so, because as you can see the building footprint on page 1, there's 44,142 square feet of main floor space, which is used for packaging purposes. On the second floor, there's a picture of the boardroom. You're showing the quality of the finish. Sometimes the pictures get faded out when they get extended a little bit, so I do apologize for that. On page 6 is the education area for training or where they have meetings for staff members. And I took a picture of the second floor office space on page 7. And on page 8 and 9 is just the manufacturing process. As you can see, very clean, good lighting. It's solid space. The bottom of page 9, we've got a racking system there. Page 10, we have where they store dry goods. You can see some more racking system with regards to boxes. And on page 11, we have the shipping area. And on page 12, we just have a picture of the maintenance room and the water tank room. Can I now start to, is everyone on page 13? Okay. Market income, how we have this property valuated at. We have this property valued at areas 52,403. We were using a rent of $8.28. With a GPI of 433,897, using 3% vacancy, 3% shortfall, and 385. 3% for expenses, 385 for shortfall. You come up with an income of $402,201. You'll notice that the cap rate here is 6.65%, which is lower than the previous property. 2 reasons for that is smaller size and subsequently a newer building, 1994. But a part of it, it's more so because of the size, not because of the age. Because between 1989 and 1994, the cap rate would be used for similar properties would be very similar. But because the age is a different factor, which is why the cap rate is higher for the previous property. And I'm just sharing that for information. A key component in my rent comparables that I've used is 4 out of the 5 properties that I've used are single tenanted properties. They only have 1 space in there that's located at. And so when we look at my comparables here, I'm not using flex warehouses. I'm usually using single tenant buildings, and usually single tenants, at least for my opinion, derive a higher market value. And the reason why I say that, if you have a choice between having a single family dwelling or a side-by-side, usually there's a higher priority on a single dwelling home on a residential property. With that being said, I've got a series of leases here. The reason why I chose Skirfield, similar size for the first one, bit higher ceiling height, built in 2000, has $9.25 rent, which is almost $1 more than the subject property. Debates, 2010 lease, whereby there's 2 the areas are the areas that we have here is 51,746, and we have $8.20. Built in 2008, 0.4 ceiling height. Which may be a reflection on why the lease is so low. The third one, this is the one property that is an industrial flex warehouse. 5-year lease, it's a newer lease in 2020, 44,000 square feet, 28 feet high, $8.50. The Debates properties, one's in 2019, one's in 2005, 32,000 and 60,000 square feet. Wall heights are between 10 and 24 feet. The one on the bottom is 28 feet. And these leases are for $8.25 and $8. Now what we're looking at here is, I've said it beforehand, one sale doesn't make a lease. And so what I've done here is I've taken sales of properties that are not super close to the reference date, but they're an indication of market value here. And so what has happened is, so we have the subject property at 41 Paquin, and you know the parameters here, where it sold for $72.51 square feet. That seems a lot lower than other properties that are in the region, from my opinion. And then I do have another sale, which is 4 years away from the reference date, which is built between 1991 and 2002, right? 41,000 square feet. Wall heights are a bit lower. That sales took place on March 17th of just over $3 million. Works up to $74.25 a square foot. So the other 3 properties that I have here, and you can see all of these located on the map here. 41 is just off Dougal Road, off Bagan. You can see it on in the sort of left of center of the building here. and you can see all the other comparables that I have in the neighborhood. So I got, 1, 2, 3, 4 different comparables here because there's only going to be so many sales of properties that take place. 25 debates, built between 1998 and 2007, 51,000 square feet. Wall height similar to the subject property. It sold for $5.9 million or $115 a square foot. 235 debates, a bit smaller than the subject property. Wall heights are smaller as well. Sold in 2018. That sale worked out to $121.84 a square foot. Debates, similar ages to between 1980 and 2001, 32,000 square feet. Wall heights vary, a bit smaller than the subject property. That sold for $108.05 a square foot. And in normal appraisal practice, the time wasn't available to do this for a more detailed analysis. But we know if we brought all these sales to the reference date of April 1st, 2021, they should be higher than what we have. Than what we have. Page 15 just shows you a general overview of the property, and you can sort of get a guideline of where 41 Paquin is relative to everything else. On page 16 is our cap rate, and the property owner has been compliant with filling out the income expense mailer, and I am open to questions. Thank you.
Yes, any questions, Mr. Rickey?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Mr. Froelich, you stated that one sale doesn't make a market. Would you agree that, and if all other things being equal, that the best evidence of market value is a arm's length, freely negotiated sale of the subject property?
Yeah, and I understand that concept. But looking at the building and looking at our comparables of information here, there may be information that I'm not exposed to. But then I've seen that it's been registered with land titles. But there's something there that, from my opinion of value for properties, something doesn't make sense to me, and I'm not too sure what it is. And if it did make sense to me, I'd be more than willing to make a recommendation to this. But because it doesn't make sense to me, that's why I'm defending it.
Okay, so you had an opportunity to inspect the property, correct?
Correct.
You had an opportunity to speak with myself and Mr. Bailey, who provided details with respect to the sale on behalf of the owner, correct?
Yeah.
All right, and the advice that was given to you that this was a freely negotiated arm's length transaction. Do you have any reason to dispute that?
I am torn with regards to the valuation, the sale price, and the valuation that we have for this property. And I'll just leave it at that because I see the sale, but I also know what market rents are. And I've seen the comparables used by Mr. Bailey here. And to me, the comparables used to justify the sale price, something doesn't fit for me. So that's why I'm defending the value that I'm defending.
Yeah, I understand your position on valuation. My question was simply, do you have any reason to dispute that this was an arm's length, freely negotiated transaction?
In your documentation, this is the second time I'm answering the question. In the documentation, we have the status of title here. It says $2.8 million. It says there's a mortgage on it, but like I stated for the second time, there's something here that I just don't understand.
So again, I'll ask it again because you haven't answered the question. The question is, do you have any reason to dispute?
I think he's answered the question twice. He's not going to say, and we can ourselves see what your question is. We get your point. I don't think Mr. Froelich is going to change his own answer to us.
Well,
he says he thinks it's suspicious. We don't know if there's any evidence to justify that. That's a whim of his. I don't consider that evidence necessarily. So, cool.
Okay, that's fine. My concern is, just a minute. My concern is the assessor is saying that there's something suspicious about this. Then I want to pin him down on that. if he has something that I'm not aware of, I want to know what it is. I understand he's taken a different approach on valuation, but Mr. Froelic's comment, and I've heard his comment that he's treating this as some kind of distressed sale. I want to explore that with him, and if he doesn't know, if he doesn't have information, that's fine. Let's just be very clear about that.
Yeah,
So
I
Mr.
don't,
Froelich,
Mr. Burke, I don't think there's any evidence before us that indicates, there's no hard evidence.
all right,
This is not a hard justify arm's length sale, okay?
okay, Mr. Froelich, did you take any steps to investigate the
No,
circumstances of the sale?
You know what? I guess if I had the time, which I don't during this time of year, I guess I'm not too sure because I don't have enough experience. I'd have to talk to some of my colleagues to see what other information I'd have to find to research the sale. But something tells me from a valuation perspective, something's not right. But I know there are a lot of times that, like, I have nothing else to add, Mr. Garden.
All right, so
I think the answer is no to your question, though. Mr.
all right, thank you. Just to look at your, maybe just to start with your page 14 of your report, Mr. Froelich, on your direct sales comparison approach. Do you have that? So
Yes, I do.
the first comp that you use is 122 Paquin.
Yes.
All right, so this is actually, the price per square foot is actually fairly close to the subject sale, correct?
But it's 4 years away from the reference date.
And it's also a fair amount smaller than the subject. Typically, economies of scale, you'd see a higher price per square foot for smaller properties, would you not?
And that is true, but it's also in the same neighborhood as the subject property.
The same, yes. So it's also, all right, we'll move on to 25 debates. You're also referencing there, similar size. Did you have a look at the, have you been inside this building, Mr. Froelich?
I know for that building here, we have pictures on file. It was on appeal. What I know is that building has changed significantly since the sale. Since the sale, there's been significant renovations to this property.
Okay, did you look at any of the work that was done prior to the sale?
Well, it was before my time, so
All right, fair enough.
I can't answer that question for you.
The 235 debates. This is again less than half the size of the subject, and you would agree that would certainly impact the selling price on per square foot basis.
But also, I don't know the breakdown between what part is office and what part is warehouse space, because it's the 14 feet portion of it is significantly lower than the subject property.
It's also on a larger lot, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And 33,
not that much larger, but it is larger.
okay. And again, finally, 333 debates, again, substantially smaller than the subject. Correct?
And then I would answer that the same way.
Yeah.
The ceiling heights, and it's 4 years away from the reference date of April 1st, 2021.
Okay, then just going to your rental comps, Mr. Froelich, the page prior. 15 Scurfield, you'd agree that's a superior location than the subject area? Typically your rents are higher in that area.
They are, in the southwest quadrant, they are for sure, yes.
All right.
It's also single tenanted building.
310 debates. That's a newer building.
Newer building.
Subject. It's my understanding that's fully air conditioned space occupied by Vita Health. Is that right?
Well, yes. Well, similar to there's a cooling system in the subject property. With regards
the cooling system though is not there for the comfort and use and enjoyment of the occupants. It's there for the requirements of Maple Leaf and the distribution center that's there, correct?
And actually, I want to update my information here. So, based on the 2020 lease, they're actually occupying 74,196, and it's $8.83 lease since that was on the 2020 mailer.
All right, I don't have that in front of me, so I can't look at it. The 1650 Notre Dame. Again, that's kind of a high-profile location on Notre Dame, and it has a high degree of office retail space. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I've done a full inspection of that. That used to be the old Labatt's Brewery site. It's that building area is 460,000 square feet. It has 4 different buildings, and it's a flex warehouse. So in that regards, I don't think the valuation should be as high as the subject property.
Okay, you have 333 debates. We've talked about that one, I believe, as well as 350 debates. We may have discussed. That again is a much newer building, but with a dated lease. Correct?
Well, the first one's 1994, which is very similar to the subject property, right?
I'm talking about 350 debates.
358 is in your property, yes.
All right, and so finally we get to your cap rate study again at page 16. This is the same chart we saw with respect to 870 Lagimodiere.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay, and again, we see your rates right across the board ranging from 5.55 to 7.45. And I take it that your cap rate of that you are using in this case, which is trying to get it here, sorry, 6.65, that's model derived. Mr. Folk, that's just your model-based cap rate?
That's correct.
All right. And are you able to give us any further explanation as to how that precise figure was calculated, and or is it just kind of what the system spits out?
Well, what we do, I always love the answer that the agents say that's about the system spits out. So because the nature of the Board of Revision hearings with regards to cap rate studies, we try to do the best job we can with regards to the sales that are out there. And so what takes place is that, when we talk about doing a cap rate study on 100,000 square foot properties, a lot of them don't sell. But what ends up happening is that what's our checks and balances system? And one of the methods that we use in checks and balances our work is that what are the sales per square foot basis that are very close to the reference date? So we'll look at the sales. So if we've got an April 1st, 2021 reference period, we're tracking the sales that were in 21 before April 1st, 2020, 2019, 2018. We're collecting all this data, and then we're looking at the sales price, and this is how we generate models. And so when the system spits it out, I take offense to that, because a lot of work and data goes into the work that we do to prepare a roll. And so, and if we look at what the industry experts say, you know what I mean? So for industrial, so our range is right in between at 6.65. You know what I mean? So if we look at Collier's 1 for industrial A property, and this is more of an industrial A than an industrial A, their top end is 6.75%. You know what I mean? And then if you look at industrial for CB Richard Ellis, they're 5.75 to 6.5. And these are experts, right?
Right.
Then we got Cushman, and let me finish, Mr. Mercury. And so then we have Cushman Wakefield here, that's their cap rate range is from 6% to 6.5, and we're higher than that. So I don't know. So I always find it interesting when agents say the system spits it out. Sorry.
But ultimately, it is the system you're relying on, is it not, Mr. Fuller?
Unequivocally.
And you did not apply any of your personal judgment in terms of what the cap rate should be for this property. It's just you're simply relying on the model. All right. And finally, just with respect to 41 Paquin, after the sale, on 2019. Mr. Fullock, did you happen to have a look at how much work was required to be done by Maple Leaf after they took over the facility? You have access to that information, do you not?
You didn't mention it to me, and for me, I didn't have the time to research it any further.
You didn't look into the permits that were taken?
Like I said, Mr. Mercury, you didn't mention all the new work that's taking place afterwards, and I didn't have the time to do further research.
Okay, fair enough. You didn't investigate. That's fine. Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Frolick, there was a sale on the property.
Yeah.
In 2019.
Yeah.
Was there a listing on the property? What can you tell me about the sale?
Mr. Bailey will be able to come in more. I tried to find the sales listing. I did some research with regards to talking with other people. I didn't find any information with regards to this listing. It's my Mr. Bailey could say this, and if I misspeak, I apologize ahead of time. But there was another manufacturing taking place in there. I may have this wrong. So Maple Leaf bought the manufacturing plant. I think it was a different company, but the point is they purchased it, so there wasn't a listing because, and that's why, when we look at what do we quantify as being a good sale, open market transaction.
Okay.
I have no evidence showing that was listed with Colliers or Cushman Wakefield or Capital Group, so I don't know.
Okay, so can I redirect Mr. Chairman to Mr. Bailey?
Well, Mr. Bailey hasn't given evidence yet. You can't ask him questions after when you give
All right.
the other question. I think.
Okay, that's fine. I can do that then. So, Mr. Frolick, if there's a sale on the property, and you think that it's on-like transaction, did you bother to do a cap rate for the property?
Well, the point is due to time constraints, I did not.
So you probably could have though.
If I had the time available, yes, but
yeah,
with the workload, unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, I did not do a cap rate study.
So you have some other sales here, that are quite old. There's a 15, 17, 217s and 18. Did you bother doing a cap rate study there?
We have.
And what were the results?
You know what? If I had the time, because it's further away from the last cycle, right? So, for example, like
but it's like you say,
it's within the
one sale doesn't make a market, but it certainly points you in the right direction.
But so that's what I'm saying here, right? So we have 3 sales that are significantly higher than the subject property sale, and so if because cap rates are so subjective, I'm pretty sure. Like I can't say verbatim, and you can't quote me, but the point is, I think we're within the ballpark because if the cap rate's super low, right? Then if the cap rate's low, then what ends up happening, the rent's going to be a bit higher, right? And so then, and so overall, I feel comfortable with the value that we have here.
So the other thing is that you've, I guess, dissected with a direct sales comparison approach, come up with a square foot rate for the subject, or of the sales. Yet, did you bother to give us the value from a direct sales approach?
I can do that for you right now, Mr.
Okay, well,
usually I do.
If you're going to present this, why didn't you go like the extra mile? But the thing is, properties like this are sold on the income account.
Yeah, and I just
you can we can in our final analysis, in the board, we can get to that figure.
Yeah, and it's sorry.
Okay, so why give us something that you're not going to really expand upon, or just leave it out, because really it's sometimes the rule of thumb, just as as checkpoints.
Yeah, well, so when we look at it per se, I just did the math here.
Yeah.
It works out to 115.41. So does it seem to be within the reasonable range of it? And so because it's discounted so
But
so
that's
heavily, and because it wasn't an open market transaction, it was a good sale, but it was, see, what will end up taking place, there'll be good transactions here that take place, different buyers, different sellers, but we don't include it in our cap rate analysis because there wasn't the data to use for it.
It's just a rough figure. I'm looking at the comparables and saying, oh, maybe it's $100 a square foot, which gives you a value of 5 million too.
Yeah,
Not at 6.
well, but the point is, so the $6 million sales at 115, and they're like whatever the board of revision decides to do.
Okay.
That's the board of revision's job to do. They hear the applicant, they hear the assessor, they decide what's reasonable. When I looked at this property, I felt that I didn't have enough data as a service to the taxpayers of the city of Winnipeg to make a recommendation on that, which is why I'm defending it today.
Right. Okay. I thank you, Mr. Frolick. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gold, Mr. Murphy asked you a question you couldn't answer. That was about
Which one is that?
that was one. I'll get that. That was one about any permits taken out since the property was.
You know what? Yeah,
Okay, and you did that with the other property, which was maybe somewhat helpful. But what I'm asking you now is, you did inspect it. Had you inspected it before?
no, it was the first time I had inspected it.
Okay. Your inspections, what do they show you? Did the property look like there were a lot of improvements made that would have been made by?
See, I saw.
The owner, let me finish the question.
Sorry.
The owner who owns it now. And I know you can, without permits, we can't put a value on it, but I'd like to know if there has been anything undertaken that you noticed.
Wait 1 sec, please. Thank
Okay.
you. Wait, you know what? It's because I'm more comfortable from working from home, accessing data, or working from my home office. Answer Mr. Okay. So what we have here is on file. We only have one permit taken out, and based it says the building facial repair, the fascia, and there was no value assigned to it. So maybe when I did research it, and what we have here. So they replaced the 3.25 by 8 double skidded use of the existing freestanding sign Maple Leaf Foods. So based on what I have, and so they have the permit value listed at $1,400. And so that's the only permit that I have here. And this was on August 28th, 2021. Maybe they've taken up permits that I don't have access to right now, or work that they've done. But even then, so if they have done as much work as Mr. Mercury's implying, then maybe the effective date should change as well.
Fair question. That was my only question.
No problem.
And it's a question that we can ask Mr. Bailey and Mr. Mercury.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So that completes our questioning. So, Mr. Mercury, you should proceed with your events.
Okay, thank you. I will turn it over to Mr. Bailey at the outset.
Very. So I believe that you've heard a little bit about the building itself. Built in 1994. This was the third time it had changed hands since 1994. So it has sold a number of times. It's a reasonably nice. I haven't been through the inside of the building, but I have inspected the outside of the building each time it has sold over the years since 1994. And it has changed uses somewhat over that time. It's gone from processing chicken to processing hamburgers to processing pork, and each of the users have used it for slightly different processes in the interim. Changing from one process to another is quite costly, and there were some permits taken out for the building. I don't have the total sum of them, but I know they were in the millions. And I don't know how much of that was equipment and how much of that was building. So I can't can't give you too much of an idea of that. But basically, it's really all interior work, just moving partitions and changing finishes to some areas, processing areas. And each individual user would have a slightly different process and would be doing that every time the property is sold. The property was on the market. It was on the market as part of a going concern, wherein they were trying to sell the property along with the business. The business of the former owner was packaging mostly beef products for other producers, wherein they would do some cutting and package them to make them store ready. During their marketing of the business, they lost their only client for the packaging, and therefore the property was idled. When Maple Leaf was approached by an agent of the owner to see whether they were interested in either the business, which was then closed by that point, or whether they were interested in having the former owner, Vantage Foods, do packaging for them. And they were not interested in having Vantage Food package for them, as they do all of their own packaging. And they don't package beef. Not in Manitoba. They do a little bit in Ontario, I believe, but very little. But they were interested in the facility, and as you can well imagine, the facility is worth a lot less on the open market than it is as part of a going concern. But they did negotiate the sale price with Vantage Foods to buy the real estate. And I spoke to one of the officers of Maple Leaf, as well as Maple Leaf's in-house legal counsel, about the deal. And it certainly was open market, and it was negotiated between the two parties. It was for the real estate only, and not the now defunct business, because there was no value there. And that's I believe both of them sought outside advice in terms of the selling price, and the selling price that they arrived at was $3.8 million. They were also selling another portion of their business, and there was, because it was still operating, there was more interest in that, and it did sell to a large Western. The other property was and facility were in Ontario, and it sold to a Western producer. So they were left with this building, and the other company that bought the Ontario property was not interested in the Winnipeg property. So that's how Maple Leaf came to this deal. Everyone I spoke to indicated that it was market, it was open market, and it was in line with prices that Maple Leaf had bought and sold other properties at, having sold two properties, one smaller than this and one larger than this, both doing similar businesses to what Maple Leaf intended to use this property for. And then it fell in line with what they had received for those other two properties, one being One Warman, the other being 140, what's the name of the street? In the same area, Panet. So I did put a fair bit of weight on the sale, occurring fall of 2019. Maple Leaf did buy some of the equipment, which was in the facility at the time under a separate deal. It didn't represent a large percent of the sale price. They bought $400,000 worth of machinery and equipment. They sold a portion of it for $135,000 and retained the rest. They had valued the equipment that they purchased above what they purchased it for. The seller Vantage was financially in good health at the time of sale, so there was no duress in terms of the sale. I did look at 4 sales, and if you turn to my report at page 8, I've also looked at the sale of 122 Paquin, which the assessor looked at. There was another sale of 40. The sale of the subject I included in that. I looked at 700 Mission, which is substantially smaller than the subject, and though it's also a little bit older than the subject, and it sold for $79. Again, not too far from the $72 that Maple Leaf paid for the property. And I also looked at 672 Kimberly. Again, smaller than the subject, slightly older than the subject, sold for $83. So again, the subject's sale price did not appear unreasonable when you looked at those other sales. And I believe these sales, even though they were slightly older than the subject, were much more comparable to the subject than most of the sales that the assessor used. And I'll discuss those later. So based on a direct sales approach, I came up with a value of a rate of $75 a square foot as of the base date evaluation, which gave me a value of $3,930,229, which I rounded to $3,930,000. I also did look at the income, and again, I looked at the rents that would have been generated by the 2 sales of the subject that Maple Leaf bought and sold, and looked at what rents that they would generate from the sale using capitalization rates, which I thought were a little high, which I thought were better representative of the market for those properties. They were a little higher than the assessor had used in returning the assessments on the property, I believe, but which would have in turn generated slightly higher rents. So I came and again, that suggested that the rent of that the assessor was putting on the property was too high. I looked at 10 different rental properties, which were similar in size to the subject property. Some of them were a little older than the subject, and they gave me a median rent of $5.63 a square foot. but they showed an average age or a median age of 1985 and an average age of 1988. So again, on average, they were a little older than the subject. So based on those 10 rentals, I concluded a rent of $5.85 a square foot. And again, for the capitalization rate, again, this is a very nicely laid out property, but it is specifically designed for food processing. It wouldn't necessarily sell for food processing, but any new owner, whether food processing or an alternate use, would have considerable cost in changing the interior to suit any tenant, whether they're general purpose or another food user. So again, there was more risk than typical of a normal income property, and therefore I felt that a cap rate that had been put on the property was too low, based on the rates given for by CBRE. I believed it was the appropriate cap rate was towards the high end of the range. And when the real estate brokers give you a range of cap rates, they're looking at investment grade properties. So they're not looking at all properties, and they're looking at what would be typical market size. So even this size property is relatively large for the market at 50,000 square feet. So it didn't seem unreasonable to use the high end of that rate as what would be appropriate for the subject property. Looking at CBRE's, Colliers, and Cushman and Wakefield's cap rates, as well as the cap rates used by the city, I concluded a cap rate of 7.25% as being reasonable for this property, given the additional rent or additional risk that would be required to renovate the property and make it usable for another tenant. So again, if you turn to page 13 of my brief, you'll see my revised valuation using the rent of $5.85, expenses of 3%, shortfall of $3.85. I came to a value of $3,826,000. In my final conclusion, I found that all three estimates of value were reasonably close, ranging from $3,800,000 to $3,930,000. And I concluded, based on the income approach, at $3,826,000 as being a reasonable representation of the market value of this property as of the reference date, particularly given that the sale did occur approximately 6 months before the reference date. If we could now if we can go to my first exhibit, you can see, which is an interior layout of the property. You can see that it's fairly busy in the interior. This is showing a layout of the process equipment currently being used by Maple Leaf, but you can see even the interior of the building has more partitioning than you'd expect of a general purpose warehouse, and most of that would be taken out by any new buyer whether they were in the food industry or looking at it for general purpose use, to either use themselves or lease. I've also in the addenda provided a little more detail on the sales history of this property. If we could now turn to my rebuttal. I have on page 2 of my rebuttal, I've looked at the assessor's direct comparison sales. With the exception of 122 Paquin, I felt that the assessor's 3 sales were all vastly superior to the subject property. And I've given you the reasons for that. 25 Debates was had just received a brand new roof at the time of sale, just prior to the time of sale. It has 40% office, which is, and the new buyer was buying it as a head office and increased that to about 60% office today. Having done extensive work to this property after the sale. So again, it was selling largely, it's substantially newer than the subject property as well, and was selling to a large degree based on the amount of office area that it provided. The 2 other sales are really too small in my mind to be even comparable to the subject. 235 Debates was is a lot newer. It was built for the tenant, or it was and it has a much larger lot area than, or a lot to building area than the subject, and was superior in that way. But again, I wouldn't compare the subject to a building half its size due to economies of scale. 333 Debates, again, substantially smaller. Built in stages, had a fair bit of work done to it in the interim. 65% of the building was built in 2001. So in that sense, it was really overall a fair bit newer than the subject. So again, I just didn't see I saw the only comparable that was really comparable to the subject as being 122 Paquin. When it came to rents, I found the same thing. If you go to page 3, I found all of the properties were substantially superior to the subject, both in age. Only one was similar age to the subject, and I'm not certain how the age of 1994 was arrived at, given that 65% of this building was built in 2001. So Scurfield is a better location, much smaller building. I have a different reported rental rate on this property than the assessor did. I have a reported rental rate of $865 rather than the assessor's $925. But again, it is far superior in terms of location and size and age and heights to that of the subject. 310 debates is a dated lease. I'm not sure why it's included. The lease lease rate was relatively high due to the landlord putting in extensive work for the tenant when they went in. I believe they required that all of the warehouse space be air conditioned, plus they put in extensive interior finishes for the tenant's use. I disagree regarding the fourth rent indicator, 1650 Notre Dame. I disagree with the assessor who stated that he felt this was inferior to the subject. It's far newer, has far better heights. It's well located. It's the tenant that went in was able to put a retail operation within their location due to its high traffic location. The subject property could not support a retail use on Paquin Road. It's less than half the size of the subject, and really it's not comparable in terms of rental rate because of the difference in size of the unit here.
Are you talking about 1650 Notre Dame?
No, I moved on to sorry. I did move on. Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to move on.
Okay, I just lost you there, so I just.
Sorry.
I apologize.
So anyway, to finish 1650 Notre Dame, it does support retail. There's other retail on the property other than this unit, but Westburn Elect did put in a retail outlet at this location that certainly the subject couldn't support a retail location. Moving on to 333 debates, it's less than half the size of the subject. Again, this property was built for the lessee, I believe. That was my understanding, to suit their particular needs. And finally, 350 debates, again, a very dated lease. I'm not sure why it's included, but it is a newer, superior building. It was built to suit for the tenant. It also has a very large lot area for the tenant's outdoor storage. In all respects, it's not comparable to the subject. And that's pretty much it for my rebuttal.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Foley, you can ask your questions now.
Yes, I have lots, and so and I apologize. I'll try to reduce them. I don't know if I should direct this to Mr. Mercury or Mr. Bailey. There's all this talk about permits. We've done some research here today. Mr. Mercury, it's a two-part question. I didn't see any documentation on all the work that's been done to the subject property due to the lack of permits that I've seen. I haven't seen any pictures of all this permit work that has taken place. But if there have been upgrades to the building, like say, for example, a new roof, new windows, changes to the HVAC system, wouldn't that change the effective light of the building? And would that not increase the value of the subject property if all this work's been done to it?
If I could start the answer there, really the only thing that's happened to the interior has been moving partition walls and services. No new services per se have gone in. They've just simply been moved. That would mean that some of the partitioning is newer than some of the other partitioning. But really, it would not affect the overall life of the building. There's been no changes to any of the basic building structure. It's all been interior, moving of constructions or redirecting services to another location or than they were serving previously.
Can you expand?
Mr. Mercury, if you want to expand on that.
I think the point here is that it's as Mr. Bailey indicated, the permit, whatever work was done, was not to improve the structure of the outside structure of the building, the roof, and so forth. What it does reflect, though, is the nature of the building, and the nature of the facility is such that any buyer, including Maple Leaf, is going to have to spend considerable dollars to modify the facility to suit its particular needs. It's not a matter of upgrading the structural integrity of the building. It's just the work that needs to be done inside the building to facilitate the business needs of the operator. That was the point of the question.
Okay, but due to the size of the building, would you not agree with me that a lot more potential buyers would be interested in this type of property? And would it be desirable or a premium to have a temperature-controlled environment that the subject property offers?
If I could answer that to begin with, all of the temperature controls within this building are there simply to serve the process and are directed to the process, and any other user for the property for food use would have different needs and would redirect any services that were considered part of the building, which most aren't, would redirect that elsewhere anyway, just like Maple Leaf did when they took occupancy of the building. It is not usable for, none of those cooling services are usable for any use other than food processing, and even then they would have to be modified for any different process that was put in.
So what you're saying, though, if hypothetically speaking, the temperature could only be -3 degrees, they wouldn't be able to change it to -15. And if they are not able to change it, how significant of a cost would it be to change it, the HVAC system? Because there's usually a thermostat of some capacity involved. So I'm sort of confused by your answer.
Well, it would be designed to meet the process needs, and it may be, where Maple Leaf may need a temperature at 4 degrees Celsius, another user may need it at 10 degrees Celsius, or which means it could be used. But if the user wanted it at -3 degrees, the system could not handle that unless the area it was serving was decreased significantly. So again, each user would have their own needs in terms of the process requirements.
I think we have the answer.
Okay, okay, thank you. I'm just curious about that because of the thermostat concept. Okay. Mr. Bailey, you talked about a sales listing taking place. I had no access to a sales listing. Is there any reason why you didn't include the sales listing in your brief as evidence?
It was a business listing, and I generally don't have access to business listings because it was, as I said, it was being marketed as part of a going concern wherein they had anticipated being able to sell it complete with workforce contracts as a going business entity.
This may be directed to Mr. Mercury as well, but maybe not. Do you know why they did not complete the sales mailer questionnaire for the subject property? Because we sent out a sales mailer, and with the sales mailer, it would have given us access to better information on the sale.
Who's supposed to fill that out? The applicant?
Usually the owner, the property owner,
The vendor?
the vendor,
We
yeah.
have no power over that.
Yeah, but the point is, as a client, I'm just wondering why they have not done
It
that.
wasn't just a client that had managed foods in this area. They have no control.
No, but the new property owner, Maple Leaf, would have been sent to them.
Okay. That's good.
I don't believe Maple Leaf was aware of it. Certainly they didn't make me aware that they'd received it. They typically, with regards to the rent and any sales, will discuss it with me prior to filling it out, and typically they will send me a copy. So either if it was sent to Maple Leaf, it appears to have been misdirected.
Okay. And that could be the case as well, based on history. Is location important when establishing real estate values?
Yes.
Okay, so based on your sales comparables and your income comparables, the majority of them are not within 2 kilometers or 1 kilometer of the subject property. Why didn't you consider that in your analysis?
Both of my sales and rental comparisons are within neighborhoods where prices are extremely similar to the subject neighborhood. So I didn't feel that there was any necessity to make adjustments.
Okay, so as you say that in terms of size, do you make any adjustments for age of the building? Because
no, I didn't make any direct adjustments. I did look at that in terms of coming up with a final rate. I do agree with you that on average, both my rental and sales comparables are slightly older than the subject.
Yeah.
It was very hard to find properties built in the 90s.
And is it? Yeah, and I understand that's why I use the comparables that I did. Do you also do an adjustment for ceiling heights? Because the ceiling heights for 2 of your subject properties are significantly lower than the subject property.
In terms of the sale properties?
The ceiling height for the subject property is 25 feet, yet 2 of your comparables that you're using do not have the same ceiling height. They're much larger than the subject property.
Yes. Again, typically on the smaller properties, I would expect a lower ceiling height. And therefore, the ceiling heights on the smaller properties were in line with what I would consider typical of that size range, whereas the subject being 50,000 square feet is pretty much in the typical ceiling height range or wall height range for a building of that size. So you're right. The smaller ones do have smaller heights, but then typically that's fairly typical of the market as well. You don't tend to build a building half the size of the subject at 25-foot heights. Some people do, but it's not the norm.
Okay, I may have misheard this, and if I do, I apologize. What's the reference date for this year's assessment?
April 1st, 2021.
Okay, because you had said that the subject property sale was only 8 months away from the reference date, but it was actually 18 months.
Sorry, I misspoke. If I did say 8 months, I
just want to clarify that. Okay, no other questions.
6 months.
Mr. Mayor, any questions?
I have none. Thank you.
Steve, do you have any questions?
Just some going back here to my notes. So you had stated that 65% of the building was built in 2001. Is that what you said?
That's for 333 debates, yes.
Oh, okay. So
The subject building was all built in 1994.
And there's been no additions.
There have been no additions since 1994.
Okay, sorry. You know what? I guess you were using that comparison, and I missed that you had moved on to talking about a
Right.
comp. Okay, thank you. And when you talked about the sale of the building, would you? The seller obviously was in a position where their business had disappeared and needed to sell the property. Would that be correct?
Well, at the time they were doing two things. They were looking for new contracts so that they could continue to operate that business, and also entertaining the idea of selling the property. So it was twofold.
Okay, but they had lost. You had said that they had lost one of their major contracts, and so they had idled the property. Is that correct?
Yes, during the marketing period, they had lost their remaining contract.
And in your opinion, would that make them more eager to sell the property than they might have been previously?
They wanted to dispose of the property one way or the other. If they'd been able to sell it as part of a going concern, it's more likely somebody would have given them a value in use rather than the open market value for the property. And I think you can appreciate the value and use of food processing facilities can be significantly higher than their open market value. So the main aim in continuing to operate the facility was so that they could sell it as a going concern.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Just been digging up on that. You see on page 6 that they also, on a separate transaction, bought the equipment, the food processing equipment in the building.
Yes, they did.
And they paid $400,000 for it, and sold subsequently some of it for $135,000. Check the rest.
Yes, they bought it for $400,000, sold $135,000 worth of it, and they were able to use the rest of the equipment for their own use.
And you indicate that they thought the value that they had bought it, the equipment they bought was in excess of $600,000, correct?
That was what Maple Leaf had believed that equipment was worth.
So the question I have is, so they sold it for 33% at least, less than the market value. That sounds to me like a part that was anxious to sell. Would you agree with that?
No, if they had gone to an equipment dealer, they would have gotten far less than $400,000 for it, and you know they wouldn't have realized a price of $400,000 if they'd gone to an equipment dealer.
You don't know that. We know that if they sold a portion of it for $135,000. I don't know what
right. About half of it.
You're saying that now. You know that for sure?
That was a rough estimate that the officer of Maple Leaf who I spoke to gave me.
And probably on Mission, you're saying that is equivalent area of the Transcon Industrial Park?
I'm sorry, you're not coming through.
In comparison to Mission, are you saying that's a comparable property to the Transcon Industrial Park? You use that as a comparison.
The subject property is in a comparable area to Transcona Industrial Park?
The property at Mission on Mission Street. Are you saying are you saying that that's a fair comparable to property in the Transcon Industrial Park?
Well, we're actually in not in Transcona, but I believe we're still in Mission Industrial Park.
It's not an industrial park, it's a road. Have you been there?
Yes, I have.
So
I guess there've been a lot of names.
You know,
They're both in St. Boniface. They're not very far apart, I guess is my point.
okay, I don't have any further questions, thank you. Second, please, the matters, we will arrive at our decisions, which will be sent out to you. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance and your evidence, and you'll hear from us. Thank you. So we can now close this.
Take care, everyone. Take care, Jamie and Ryan.